Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. And here I am with a new topic in this course, uh, Pedagogical Approaches in Translation and Interpretation. And today's topic is status of translation and interpretation pedagogy in translation studies. In this lecture, we shall be discussing mainly one thing, which is where we can place the pedagogy within the circle of translation studies. Where is its place? What is its importance? And a lot of other questions that will be discussed in this lecture. So let's start. Uh, Basically, we are going to discuss three base points. Uh, in the beginning, we need to raise some questions, and probably we shall try to answer question number one in the very beginning, and the remaining questions, of course, will continue along with our discussion till the end of this lecture. The second point discussed in this lecture is a way to understand the status, that is translation pedagogy status in translation studies. And for this, we are getting help of Holmes' famous map of Holmes, map of translation studies. The third is Holmes' map of translation study and pedagogy. In this we shall try to connect the whole point number two with number three, the relationship between translation. It's not relationship. Basically, it is the place where the pedagogy, translation pedagogy, is situated in translation studies. Question number one is that what is meant by status, because in the main topic we are using the word status of translation pedagogy in translation studies. So question number one is related to this basic idea, this basic theme of this lecture. So what is meant by the status? By status we mean the place, position of pedagogy in theoretical and or applied areas of translation studies. This we can have different analogies to understand this the status of translation pedagogy in translation studies. For example, take this pen, and you know this pen has it doesn't have cap, but this has a system of this opening and closing. I hope you can see it clearly, but it has parts also. So where is the tip of this refill with which we write, or where we put this button? If we put this button somewhere here, and I think there will be a problem, or it's assumption, uh, but for the proper functioning, we know that this the button's place is here, and when we push this button, so we can write after that, and when we push this button, we can switch it off, or we can the otherwise. The point here is that the translation pedagogy in translation studies, where it is, and is it a static phenomena in translation studies? Is it a dynamic phenomena in translation studies? It is something which is just taking ideas from other areas of translation studies and giving nothing, and so on and so forth? Actually, although I have written this question, what is the relation of pedagogy with other branches of translation studies? How other areas of translation studies contribute in the development of translation and interpretation pedagogy? How pedagogy contribute in the intellectual development of translation studies? In the slide, you just see 3-4 questions, but basically these can be divided into many questions. As I said, is it static? Is it dynamic? Is it something which can be increased or reduced, and so on and so forth? So I request you to keep all these questions and the questions that may arise in your mind, intact into your brain during this discussion, because this is very, very important, so that we become well aware of what happens when we talk of pedagogy and related things. The second point is a way to understand the status of translation pedagogy, and we are using Homens Map of Translation Studies to understand this. And because Homens Map is little bit detailed description of translation studies, little bit I said, but it gives a very good idea of what translation studies is. But this also gives us a good opportunity to understand the role of translation pedagogy in translation studies in general and in specific areas. I also request you to be more attentive and give more focus, because we are going to use this man's map, and you can see his picture here and the details of his bag a little bit, so the era of his era, and these are little bit brief introduction. He was an American born Dutch poet, translator and translation scholar. He became very famous for his paper called The Name and Nature of Translation Studies, and it was written and presented in a linguistic meeting of the scholars in 1972, and is widely recognized as founding statement of translation studies. This man actually, the credit goes to this man for drawing lines, for drawing the map for translation studies, followed by another scholar of translation studies, Ghazi, who elaborated his map and made things more clearer. So let's start. This is his map, known as Homens Map of Translation Studies. There are a lot of lines and then sublines and so on and so forth. Don't worry, because we can see, basically there are two things. One is pure. As you can see, the first division is pure on the left side and applied on the right side. Now I request you to forget the applied side for the time being and come to pure only. When you see the pure, there are again two branches. On the left is theoretical, on the right is descriptive. And for the descriptive, we have again three divisions. One is product oriented and process oriented and function oriented. On the theoretical, we have again two branches, general and luckily we don't have branches of the general, but for the partial we have six more branches of the partial theoretical translation studies. I'm starting from my left side, medium restricted the theories, area restricted theories, rank restricted theories, text type restricted theories, and time restricted theories, and then problem restricted theory. But as I said, because in the first test, when we see this map, it gives the impression that this is very complicated. That's why to make this little bit detailed map in a very easy way, as I said, we start with the pure, and then we go further to descriptive, and when we finish descriptive we come back to the theoretical, and of course in the theoretical we have only partial, which is 6. So things will become, I hope, inshallah, easy for you. So this is the first division, as we have seen in the map. Number 1 is pure on the left, and number 2 applied on the right side. So we can forget the number 2 applied for the time being, as I said earlier, and we can start with the pure. So pure is again divided into two things, as you have seen in the map. Number one is descriptive. This is on the right side, and number two is theoretical. This is on the left side. So we are going to start with the descriptive, and then we shall shift to theoretical. What is the theoretical pure translation studies, and its descriptive part is the description of phenomenon of translation. We just describe, we just tell what we see as scholars, as researchers, as students. This is the description. If I say if I say I'm going to describe this your room where you are sitting right now, I would say how much chairs are here. There is a multimedia. Maybe there is a how many students are sitting, and what is the time and the size of the room. What I'm doing is I'm just describing what I see. This is exactly what is meant by this term descriptive translation studies. When we see something and then we try to describe it or analyze it, that's it. In the theoretical translation studies, there the scholars uh, try to conclude general principles to explain and predict such phenomena in the theoretical, and general and specific, of course, both, as we have seen, the general theories and then the partial theories. So the point here is that we try to extract the principles. We try to reach to the level of a theory. Here we are not describing. Description is done. After the description, we say that this is it. We say that this principle is applied on such and such situation, or this principle is applied on all the situation. That is general theory and the partial theories. Okay, what is the descriptive? Again, we are coming back to descriptive. As I said, we shall start from descriptive side of the pure. And here we have three things. One is the product-oriented descriptive translation studies. DTS stands for descriptive translation studies. In the literature and the books that you read and the material that you use, usually this abbreviation DTS is used for descriptive translation studies. So the product oriented descriptive translation studies. Before I read the remaining lines here and try to explain it, what is a product in the translation? Product means the translated text, written form or oral form, both. Product means the translated text, written form or oral form. Whatever is translated from a language into another, the, the translated text, interpreted text is the product. I think this brief and very simple explanation of the word descriptive of the product shall help us. So when we say analysis of a single ST and TT pair, single ST and TT pair, or a comparative analysis of several TTs, that is the target text, of the same STs one into one or more TTs, means we say that the translation from Arabic into English, that is single ST is English, is Arabic, and TT is English, single pair. Or comparative analysis, several target texts of the same ST. So the same ST is there, that is again here is Arabic, but the same text has been translated into English, into Arabic, into Chinese, into French, and so on. So the comparative analysis of this is also, because we have the product, so we are comparing the product with the original text is describing. So description in this case. Description has two dimensions: is diachronic, that is the following developments over the time, or synchronic, at a single point of period in time. Diachronic is that the one text. Take the example of Quran translation. Quran has been translated into many languages throughout the centuries, and still the process is going on. So, if I want to study the diachronic descriptive translation studies of the Quran translation into Urdu, so I can take a translation, the first translation that was done, and as you know, Shah Abdul Qadir translated Quran into Urdu. This is the first translation, and then followed by other now. So over the years, the Quran translation, study of Quran translation over the years would be diachronic, and synchronic at a single point or period in time. Maybe we can say that we can take only 5 years duration and collect the Quran translation of which were done during the 5 years only, and then we try to compare them, analyze them, this product. Yeah, that is the translation of Quranic text. Function oriented descriptive translation studies is the description of the function of translation, the recipient, socio-cultural situation. The concept of function, the term of function here in Homens Map means the impact of translation. Suppose the Quran is translated into Urdu and people read this translation, what impact this translation left on the brains and on the minds of the readers. That is the function oriented descriptive translation studies. I repeat, I'm trying to explain the term function because this term is very important in this case, and this gives us a very important direction towards the research in the area of translation studies. So the description of the function of translations, the recipient socio-cultural situation. Quran has been translated into English by the Orientalists themselves. Quran has also been translated into English by Muslims. So, what is the impact of translation done by an Orientalist in the target audience, in the minds of the target audience, and what is the impact of a Muslim translation, a translation done by a Muslim scholar into English on the minds of, let's say, the non-native speakers. They are the English-speaking people. So this is a fun. If we describe the impact or the effects that are caused by this translation or that translation, this means we are describing function of translation. Okay, which texts were translated when and where, the influences that were exerted. Example, the subtitling of contemporary cartoon films into Arabic and their function means their influence on the minds of the kids. I have given, I think, couple of other examples related to Quran translation. Now come to the process-oriented translation. What is the process? When we say the process is related to how the cognitive processes happens in the mind of the translator. That is the process oriented descriptive translation studies, and it is concerned with trying to find out what happens in the minds of a translator. Of course, this branch, this side of the translation is more related to psychology. It's a cognitive perspective and psychology of translation. There are a lot of ways when we discuss the how to conduct the research in these areas. There are a lot of tools developed and devised by the translation scholars to study the process. I think this is not time to discuss those tools. These tools shall be discussed in another course. You might be studying that course in the next semester, which is the research in translation studies. We have finished this part. We have finished. Can you see the pure on the right side descriptive? So we have discussed product oriented, function oriented, and process oriented. We have discussed these three things in the pure part of translation studies. Now we are going to shift towards the theoretical part of the translation studies on the left side. So if we see this theoretical is divided mainly into two parts. Number one is the general theories, and number two, as we shall see in the next slide, is the partial. So the general theories about all types of translation in all the languages. For example, there is a general theory that the languages are different in their structures. So those languages which are different in the structures, the probability is that the problems are more in those pair where the basic structures of the source text and the target text are different. So we have more problems of translation in that language pair. But if the languages are closely related to the one family, or they have close relationship, historical close relationship, so the problem, and by virtue of these two things, the differences between this source language and the target languages are not too much, so the problems would be lesser than as compared to the first pair. So this is a general theory of the translation, and then making generalization that will be relevant for translation as a whole. Universals they are also known as universals of translation. There is a very simple universal of translation, that the every language can be translated. It's a universal. It looks very simple, but if you discuss this in detail, you find that there are a lot of details associated with this. So, in the literature, in the books, you will also see the universals of translation. They are the basic principles that can be applied on, they can be generalized and can be applied on all and every situation. Okay, now come to the, I think the biggest part of this map is the six categories of partial theories of translation study. And we have these medium restricted partial theories of translation studies, area restricted partial theories of translation studies, and rank restricted partial theories of translation studies, and text type restricted partial theories of translation. Why I'm using the word partial? Because these different parts are taken care of that area only. Time restricted partial theories of translation studies, and problem restricted partial theories of translation studies. So let's take each partial theory separately, one by one, and here it is. This is medium restricted uh, theories of translation studies. When we say medium, we are talking about the means, or we are trying to answer the question how this text was translated. And translation by human, was it translated by human being? Was it translated by a machine? Nowadays we also have this question, how? Human assistance machine translation, was it human? It was a machine translation basically, but then it was corrected, or it was updated by human translation, machine assisted human translation, or maybe the human got the assistance of machine and then completed the translation. Is it a written translation, or again is related to medium restricted translation theories? Is it oral translation interpreting? Is it consecutive, or it is simultaneous? Is it sign, or it is a lot of media for translating things. So all the theories that are related to medium restricted, media restricted, or media so are can be written under this category. Um, Dear students, don't forget, we are not studying the Holmes map as such. We want to study the place of translation pedagogy in the circle area of translation studies. So don't forget the main purpose of this lecture, because if you forget this, you will be lost and it will be very difficult. But all these details are so important to understand. So give full attention to these details with this caution, with this warning that we are studying all this for the purpose of understanding the status of translation pedagogy in the area of translation studies. Okay, number two is area restricted theories. When we the term area is related to the geographical areas. So when we say geographical areas, actually we are talking about different languages. So specific languages, groups of languages, and or culture. Area means the Asian languages, or within Asia we can divide Asia into many parts. In Pakistan also many provinces, cities, and if there are languages associated. So area restricted theories means the languages, theories related to the languages, close related to work in contrastive linguistics and stylistics, because in this the famous model as for the product of translation is concerned is to study the differences and the similarities between two languages. So the language that is spoken in the Arabian Peninsula is compared with the language that is spoken in one of the European countries. So areas, different geographical areas. That means the languages. Rank restricted theories are the linguistic levels. Rank means the levels. We say that we are studying the translation at word level. We are studying the translation at phrase level. We are studying the translation or the product or process or function at sentence level. And then we are also analyzing the styles in of the translated text in comparison to the source text and so on. This is uh, this is very important aspect that for the researchers and you other researchers of translation studies. And you can also visualize, you can also imagine a topic for your research through this, that I'm going to study the product, that is the translated text, in comparison with the source text. And but I can also specify the level at word level. And word can also be divided. Word is noun, word is pronoun, word is verb, word is the adjective, word is this, or word is that, according to different schemes in different languages. And also you can also study the phrases, you can also study the sentence structure, you can also study the style, overall style of the language in this regard. So this is very important. Now we can go to the next, which is text type restricted translation theory. I think you know that there are a lot of text types. Literary texts are different from the legal text. Legal texts have their own nature as compared to the business text, and the business texts are different from the medical text, and so on and so forth. So the point is here that the partial theories related to, for example, and essentially, the theory related to the legal texts are different from the theory related to the literary text. And theories related to the literary text are naturally different from the theory related to the medical text, or the media text, or the business text, or a lot of areas for human knowledge and human experience. Okay, time restricted partial theories are referring to the theories and translations to specific time frames and periods. That's the history of translation and falls into this category. Time restricted, when we talk about the time restricted partial theories of translation studies, we can take example of what happened in the Abbasid era. What kind of books were translated, and then we try to we try to conclude some theories, we try to reach some theories related to that. Because we see that certain kinds of texts were translated in Abbasid era in the Arab Muslim culture civilization. So the question is why it happened, and how these books were translated, and what strategies were used for the translation of these books. All these things, all answer to these things, or researches in this direction can be, put in this category: time restricted translation theories. And now the problem restricted translation theories is the certain problem, as the equivalence is a big problem. And actually nowadays the scholars of translation, they are saying that equivalence itself is a problem for translation studies. So the term should be left outside of the circle of translation studies, or the shift, or the terminologies, or the proverbs. What are the problems of translating Arabic proverbs into English and vice versa? Because the cultures are different, because the human experiences are different. So, how to do that? The problem restricted translation theory. So, there could be translating, for example, the Arabic verb into English tenses. We have only three tenses in basic three tenses in Arabic, but in English, I think we have 12 basic and then divided into more. So, point is how to deal with the problem of translating one verb, because this is a problem. Simply three, and for three we have more number of tenses in English. So problem related translation theories. Okay, my dear student, I think we have talked too much about, and I'm sure you understand this part right now. This one, we started from here, map, the pure side. So we have discussed the descriptive with the three kinds. We have also discussed the theoretical with basic 2 and the partial with 6 kinds. So I hope now your ideas about these branches of translation studies is clear. So with this we can now move to the this one, applied. So in the map we see the applied translation studies. Here we have translation training. Translation training means translation education, and under the translation training we see the curriculum design and the testing, that is the examination, and teaching evaluation methods is one part of translation training. On the In the middle you see the translation tools, because it's applied side, huh? So translation tools, and we have IT tools, we have dictionaries, we have grammar books, and the in the IT tools we can say the applications, translation software, online databases, internet, and many things can also be mentioned under this, because this area has produced developed a lot really. So on the right side you see the translation criticism. This is again we are talking about the applied. So in translation criticism we have revision of translation, we have evaluation of translation, and then we have reviews on the translated text or on the translators, and so on and so forth. So the applied part has its own branches and other details, but I hope that you have a starting idea from this slide, because I'm going to explain these things. So the applied 3, translation training, as we have seen in the map, and then translation tools or aid, and then the translation criticism, and each part with its branches. Okay, now we want to see the Holmes map of translation and pedagogy, and I think I'm just trying to, I stayed here for a purpose, because after that I will be discussing these things again, but now with the point number three, relating these things to the translation pedagogy, because the here lies the translation pedagogy. Basically, the core place of translation pedagogy is here, where translation training. This is number one. But the translation training is not confined to these three things. It is also related to the translation tools, as you can see. Nowadays, in the classroom teaching, dictionaries are used, grammar books are also used, IT tools are also used, and also the third part of applied translation studies is the translation criticism, with the three kinds also are relevant to translation pedagogy. But that's not, this is not it, but this is the main area of translation pedagogy. So I hope you will be with me. Translation training. In the translation training, here you see three things: the teaching methods and the testing techniques and the curriculum planning. I think let's start with the curriculum planning. Translation training, we need curriculum. Without curriculum, you cannot teach. And the curriculum means many things. Curriculum means the that you prepare the objectives of a particular course, and then objectives of each chapter, objective of each source text that is going to be taught inside the classroom, and so on and so forth. Long detail, and we have a separate lecture on these, so I'm not going to spend more time discussing this. So in this lecture, I think this is enough for the curriculum planning. And for the testing technique is the examination. Basically, it is about the examination, how the teaching is tested, how the training is tested, that the pace of the learning, how can we determine the pace of the learning of this on the part of the student. And also the teaching methods, we also talk about what is the best teaching method for a particular type of translation lesson. When I say the teaching techniques, methods or techniques, we have this, again, we shall be discussing this in detail, and coupled with the practical exercise. But there are many teaching methods. You cannot use the same teaching method that you are using in the basic translation course. You cannot use these teaching methods in teaching and interpreting course. Big difference. Big difference. You cannot use the testing techniques used in this basic translation course for testing the learning of the students in an interpreting course. Big difference. So on. You cannot teach legal translation the way you teach literate translation. So teaching techniques are different for different situations. So point here is that we are now trying to relate the Holmes map to translation pedagogy. This is the point, and the number one point is that here we are. Here is the translation pedagogy. Basically, the core of translation pedagogy lies in translation training. But this is not enough. Translation aids and tools are also part of the translation pedagogy. I mean, the IT applications and also dictionaries and the grammar books and translation software, online databases, use of internet, and so on, so forth. I mean, the as I said earlier, and I'm just going to repeat it, IT tools are essential tools for translation teaching. Dictionaries are essential tool for translation teaching. Grammar books are also essential tools for translation teaching. And the teachers, they also get help from these tools, and they also ask the student to use these tools for their learning. Translation criticism is also very important related to translation pedagogy. Here you see three things have been mentioned here, and I think it is better to differentiate with them. Let's start from the left side, which is revision. When we say the translation criticism, in the classroom setting, students translate a text and then give it to the teacher, and teachers revise the translation. This is what revision of translation. Or in the practical area, one book is translated, and then there is a person who is going to revise that translation. Revise, that means improve it, make the corrections, make the adjustments, make the adjustments in terminology, in the structure, and so on and so forth. That is revision, and I hope this is clear. As for the evaluation is concerned, this is different from revision. Evaluation is that when the translation is given for the evaluator and the evaluator giving marks, that is evaluation. That the translator is, we can say that the evaluation, the highest level is that the evaluator gives marks, let's say 80 out of 100 or so on. But evaluation also, this translation is good in that area. Now I am not touching the original translation. The evaluator is not correcting anything. The evaluator is not making any changes in the translation. But evaluation, this translation can be considered the best translation, and then to specify as an evaluator in in using in using terminologies in a precise way is your evaluation. But this translation at the same time needs revision. Go back to revision, evaluation, revision in the sentence structure, because the grammatical, there are a lot of grammatical mistakes and so on. So what is this? Evaluation. So here is the evaluation. As for the reviews are concerned, reviews are those writings which are usually published in newspapers or magazines about certain books. A book is published, translated book is published, and people, experts and scholars, literary persons, they write reviews on the translation. This is very similar to the reviews on the original books. The reviews are published that uh, how how is the book, what is the idea of the book, and how it came into existence, and what the writer thought to say, and how successfully he or she has been in expressing his or her thoughts and ideas and so on. Same can be applied on translation. So these are three different things. Okay, and they are also related to translation pedagogy, because the translation teachers, they get help from these revisions, they also get help from the evaluations, and they also get help from, but rather they use these things inside the classroom according to their need and according to the level of the students. Okay, come back to the map once again, because here we are with the map once again. Now put your finger on right side, applied. And if I say here is the translation pedagogy, but does this mean that this is the only place of translation pedagogy in translation studies? This is very, very important to understand. The answer is no. Why? Because if you see the descriptive, product, process, and function oriented, you see these descriptions, they provide huge knowledge to be applied on the applied translation studies side. So that means the translation pedagogy help a lot of help rather from the descriptive part of pure translation studies. And same I think is more clear here in the partial theoretical and the partial medium restricted. We know medium restricted means the translation done by a human being or machine, or this is written or oral and so on and so forth. So the theory is developed in this medium restricted partial translation studies areas are actually relevant to the applied side. So you can draw a line from this area restricted to applied, rank restricted to applied, text type restricted to applied, and time restricted to applied, and problem restricted to applied, because everything that is produced in the theoretical part of these areas become relevant for the implementation inside the classroom for the purpose of training, for the purpose of teaching, for the purpose of preparing translators and interpreters. I'm sure you are able to relate these pure sides to the applied side. And when we do this, of course, we draw an arrow towards applied, which is translation pedagogy, from descriptive and from partial translation theories. But is this enough? Is this the place of translation pedagogy in translation studies? My answer is no. This is, we have another aspect, and that aspect is that the translation pedagogy from the applied side, the teachers, what the teachers do inside the classroom, they also create a data for research. For what? For descriptive translation studies, because the research in the area of translation pedagogy is a complete area where people do the research, collect the data, analyze, and these things also go back to descriptive translation, theoretical translation studies, and partial theoretical translation studies. So in a way we can say that that the translation pedagogy, or the status of translation pedagogy in this in the light of this map, is not static, is a very dynamic. It gives and it takes. It influences the areas, and it is being influenced by the theoretical part. So here we can say that the theory and the applied both, and this is what is required actually, not only in translation, it is required in all the areas of knowledge, where the theory and the application should go hand in hand, so that they help each other. They are not opposites, they are not enemies. They should work together to help each other. Of course the difference remain, but the difference should be like this. It's not like this, that the theory is something else, direction of theory is toward east, and direction of application is toward west. So they become enemies, as we see usually when people talk about the theory and the application, though. So my suggestion here is that if we take translation pedagogy from this perspective, we can make it more fruitful, more meaningful, and result oriented. So we can say applied falls in the core of, I'm just, I think, a brief what I have said. Applied falls in the core of T&I pedagogy, of course. The results of DTS research can be fed into the theoretical branch to evolve either a general theory or translation, or partial theories of translation. Pedagogy contribute a lot in shaping theories, a kind of repetition. Theories work behind the pedagogy, sure, of course. It's a two-way interplay between translation studies and pedagogy. So this is the what you have seen in your book, the lines that have been drawn from one side to other. But in I would add more lines, because the pedagogy also provides a lot of material to theoretical translation studies. If I have a face-to-face class, I would ask you to do this group activity, that you see this map once again in the help of what I have said so far, and then you try to write your own points, how uh, translation pedagogy is related to translation studies. Of course, we are using Homens Map here. We can do it in a different way as well. We can also if we have better knowledge of in the area of translation studies, we can we can relate this in a different way. But let's be focused on this map and do this activity, that you write down the relationship of translation pedagogy to the other parts of translation studies. And also you try to find the give and take dynamism between translation pedagogy and other areas of translation study. And when I say other areas of translation studies, I'm talking about the product of translation, I'm talking about the process of translation, I'm talking about the function of translation, and I'm also talking about the medium restricted translation theories, rank restricted translation theories, area restricted translation theories, problem restricted translation theories, and the remaining two or more, whatever come in your mind. And when we meet tomorrow, inshallah, I would like you people to see your the group activity or the result of your group activity. And also can you add more points than the discussed here in this lecture? This would be my concern when I get back to you and ask you about the result of this group activity. Okay, my dear student, the last not the least, the next advanced reading. uh, Next, advanced reading, influence of other fields on translation pedagogy. Because the translation pedagogy, with the help of this lecture, I think this lecture is connected to the next one coming. We know that the translation pedagogy is translation studies, but we also want to understand the influences that have come from other areas. We know the influence of translation theory. Partially, I have discussed this, but we shall be discussing it in a different way. Today, I said translation studies, and we discussed the theories mainly, or the theoretical part, not theories, but the theoretical part, and also the influence of linguistics. Very important influence of linguistics, because in the linguistics, the teaching of one language is the focus. Here, the teaching of translated thing, or at least two languages are involved. So, the translation pedagogy has been influenced by the linguistics as well, especially the applied linguistics. And then the influence of computers on translation pedagogy. So you are required to read the pages or these subheadings available in your book, or the pages that cover these three topics, and this is for the next lecture. With this, I just conclude, and I would just request you to be more attentive, at least understand the map, understanding map of Holmes map of translation studies in this lecture. As I said, our main focus is to understand the status of translation pedagogy in this area, but there is another benefit associated with. So give more focus, more attention for the understanding of this map. What is the second benefit, or the other benefit for this focus, for this attention, is that because you are the researchers of translation studies, at least you can have a good idea of the area of translation studies. Area, what is the area? I always ask my students to please, before you think too many things, focus three things only mentioned under descriptive translation studies. Three things for the cause of research, or for defining translation, core of translation, and then the periphery, and then other circles around the periphery. Point is here, product. In translation studies, we study the product, that is the translated text, as I said, and the translated oral speech, and also the process, how this translation has been done, what processes took place in the brain of the translator that produced this translation, working, brains working or cognitive processes associated with the production of this translation. And most important and interesting is the function, which is the influence that is caused by certain translation 1, translation 2, translation 3, this translation or that translation. With this very, very brief conclusion of my lecture, I say goodbye. Assalamu alaikum. See you tomorrow with the lecture on other course and also a face-to-face meeting. Assalamu alaikum once again. Thank you very much.